Howdy, this is Texas Gabi, and today I would like to show you how to weave a buttonhole on the Zoom-Loom. And you wonder, this is like, why does she have this weave and stitch along stuff up there? Well, here's the story. I did notice in week 5 when we were practicing the buttonhole and the blanket stitch that there were not that many square motifs, particularly not square motifs with a real buttonhole in it. And I thought I gave instructions and provided, how to weave a buttonhole. So I asked around a little bit. And so people said, yeah, well, when I asked, okay, looks like you didn't weave the buttonhole. And people said, yeah, well, I mumble, just didn't we feel comfortable with that weaving, because there are so many things that are different. It's a different weaving method, and then I just wasn't sure how to get the hole into the fabric. So this might be a little bit of an afterthought since the weave and stitch along is over at this point, but I decided to do this video anyway for future reference, or if you want to try and weave a buttonhole and try the buttonhole stitch on that, or what have you. So this video is provided for future buttonhole weavers. What you see here is I do have the instructions, and I will provide the link to the instructions weaving buttonholes with a photo guide on how to do it. Here is our handy dandy Zoom-Loom, and you see here 2 needles. One needle we will use for weaving, and the other needle we will use to keep the buttonhole side straight, which is kind of a bonus. It's not necessary, but we'll get to that later. And I today will use the Caron Simply Soft, like I did for the weave and stitch along, just in a different color so that you can hopefully see it a little bit better. And oh yeah, here is our buttonhole sample. I already used it and attached it to the bag that will go to Stitches of Love. So here's our real buttonhole that we will weave today, and it's about 1 inch tall, so that it will fit a button that's about 1 inch tall. And yeah, this is one of those bags that we made in our charity project. Oh, here, this is, by the way, the small Sweetheart loom from Hazel Rose, and it's a little pocket, so you can actually put something into it, like a little treat or a little message or something. But okay, let's not go down that rabbit hole. So today we want to make a square and weave in a buttonhole. Those of you who are familiar with Zoom-Loom weaving, they say, this like, how do you get this buttonhole in there? Because there are, once you have wound your loom, there are threads everywhere. Well, and that's the key to it, because we will use a different winding method. And this is the 2-layer winding method. So this video will actually have 2 topics or 2 benefits. Number 1, I will show you how to use the 2-layer weaving method, and as a bonus, I will show you how to weave the buttonhole. All right, let's take a look. Can we zoom in, please? Thank you. All right, let's take a look. The traditional way to weave the looms that have those 3-pin groups is that you have 3 layers of winding. There's like 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then you have 1 layer where you actually weave. So this is why people started to call it the 3-layer winding method. if we want to make a buttonhole, we have to be able to put a slit in there somewhere, and we can't do that when we have wound threads in all directions, all right? So this is why you use the 2-layer wrapping method to be able to get that slit in there in the end. The 2-layer wrapping method is also very comes in very handy when you weave traditional weaving patterns, and this herein lies the key. The 2-layer method is actually much less spooky than it sounds. It's pretty much, if you think about it, you go back to original weaving. In original weaving, on any loom, you have the things that go like this vertically, and that's called the warps. And then when you have warped your loom, you start with the weaving. So after you put the warps in, whoopsie daisy, you start with the weaving, and the traditional weaving is just going under and over. Okay, so with the zoom loom or with a 3-pin group, there is an extra layer of warping where you go, or winding, where you put an extra layer in like this, and that, I think, is the confusing part. It's very interesting and opens up very different ways of weaving, but it might be confusing when it comes to things like buttonholes. So when you hear 2-layer warping, it's pretty much going back to the traditional weaving where you warp first and then you weave. Okay, so only 2 directions. Now, how do we do that? So it's actually, what I want to say is, it's not more complicated, it's less complicated. So you start, as you usually do, by putting your thread into position. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so have the loom in front of you like this. And then you start winding the way you usually do. So the first layer goes around the last 2 pins in each group, 3-pin group. Okay, so I do this very quickly. At this point, I assume you know that you are familiar with the regular 3-pin weaving on the Zoom loom or any other loom that has these 3-pin groups. Here we go. Almost there. So, and we end the first layer here at the bottom right, number 2, between the last 2 pins. Okay? Now what we do is, what we usually would do is turn the loom and wind the second layer. Now we only want 2 layers, and the trick here is that we skip the second layer of winding and go straight to the third. How do we do that? So one more time, this is corner number 2, and at the end of the first wind, your working thread comes out between the 2 pins that are right down right here. Okay, so what you do next is you turn the loom around 180 degrees, so not 90 degrees but 180, so completely upside down. 1, 2, and your working thread is now at the top left. Okay, what we will be doing is we will skip winding the second layer and go straight into the third. How do we do that? Our working thread is at the top left corner, coming out between those 2 pins. We are working our way from the left to the right, and we will work the last 2 pins of each group. So exception, of course, is here the beginning, because there are only 2 pins and you already came out between those 2 pins. So just go around that next pin, okay, and go down to the first group here, on the bottom left. That's number 4, by the way, if you want to stay with me. And work around the last 2 pins. Go up, last 2 pins. Down, last 2 pins. Up, last 2 pins. Down, last 2 pins. And you can already see this looks very much like layer 3, doesn't it? If you look at your 3-pin groups, you see that you have the same scallops forming. Here we go, almost there. Okay, here at the top right you have the 4 pins, so just go through the middle 2 pins and you can come out, that's actually quite interesting. Here on the Zoom Loom, this is corner number 3 and the arrow points that way, but we come out that way, and that is okay because we only have 2 layers. Okay, so this is what it looks like here now, and you can see that you have this really traditional warp looking. There's nothing that goes across. So layer 1 and layer 3, you skip layer 2, and here is your layer 2 warping method or winding method. Now, if you look at it, we haven't even woven anything, but you can now see that it splits easily here at any point. So this is where we will be weaving our buttonholes, okay? So now we don't have those threads here that would interfere with it. We only have all our warps and no wefts at this point, which makes it pretty much easy for the traditional weaving. I want to put the emphasis on the traditional weaving because this weaving method, the 2-layer weaving method, is extremely convenient or powerful or inspirational, whatever you want to call it, because you can go and pick up any traditional warp weft pattern and weave it here, whether it's overshot or what have you. Any thread manipulation that you can do on the traditional warp weft weaving, you can now transfer easily to weave it here on the Zoom Loom. Our specialty compared to other looms is that you still have the scallops here on 2 sides, but the traditional edging on the other 2 sides. And you will see that in a minute. Let me just see. All right. I was just peeking in my own directions here, and I should be fair and show you. So this is all in the weaving buttonholes. What we have done here is we have woven the first layer, and here is a zoom in on how to start the second layer. Here is the second layer, and you will now have 31 threads or warp threads across like you usually have. Okay, so there's no difference. All right, now we come to the wrapping part right here, and you need to wrap 9 times and cut to have enough yarn. This is a little bit more than the usual 5 with the other method because there is nothing going across right now and you need to have plenty. Okay, so let's do this here. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you can, just a note here on the side, you can already see 9 reps versus 5 reps. There's a lot of yarn going on, okay? Because you now have to weave every row manually, where the other 3-pin weaving or 3-layer weaving method, you pretty much wind 1 layer and don't have to weave it. So there is a lot more yarn involved here if you do it that way, and it will be a little bit more pulling, particularly in the beginning. If this is too much yarn for you, I'll just put this up here and you can see it here. So there's a lot of yarn right here. This is all the yarn that you have on your needle. That's quite a bit, but if this is too much, you could just start with 5 and then connect the yarn in, once you run out. And the way to do it is you pretty much, let's say you have about 5 yards and you wind up here in the middle. What you do is you weave the end and you weave the beginning in the same shaft or the same way and have them overlap a little bit like that. And then when you weave the next row with the new thread, it will squeeze in those 2 rows and hold them in place. That is again another traditional weaving method, and you will see it minimally. It will probably look a little bit like when you weave in ends. I'm just showing you this here. So weaving in ends, so you have a little piece where you have 2 threads in the same shaft, and that's quite all right. This eliminates that you have this very, very long yarn to pull through. If you don't like it, pull the long yarn. There's nothing wrong with it. Okay, so we are at point 3 on our Zoom Loom right here, and we have everything completely warped. We will start weaving. And how do we do that? On corner 3, there are these 2 pins here on the corner. Go under that loop on that corner and then over the last thread that you wove, and then you just do an under over all across. The neat thing here is that you don't have to worry about, where do I go between which threads, because there are no other wefts available at this point. You are creating the very first one, like with traditional weaving. So, and you can see here that with my left hand, I hold down the warp so that it doesn't run away. Okay, and then I come out here at the first opening and put my finger. Now with that much yarn, you definitely want to put your finger on it here when you pull through to make sure that you don't lose anything. Okay, so and pull and pull and pull, and here we go. All right, so, and you can use your handy dandy fork, and here is your very first row woven on the 2-layer warping. Right? Let's do this a few more times. You can weave up. Okay, you can turn it around for the right-hander, and you go. Now, what you need to do is, since you have to weave every row here, you just go around each pin, or you go around just one pin here and weave the next row. And it's just a regular under over all the way across. Okay, and you come out at between those 2 pins here. You have to be careful. This is a little bit looser here, so be careful that you don't pop it off. If you can put it on the plate or on your lap or a pillow, I think for the first few times you will definitely benefit from that. All right, and put your finger on and pull it all the way through. Here you go. And here's your second row. Let's pack it with a fork, fancy or not. Okay, and here, and now you can't really not see any difference in the weaving itself. It's, you know, with a plain weaving. Let's do a few more rows. So I just turn it around, and we go around the next pin, because I need to show you something after this row. So let's do this one. And here's the thing, if you come up over, you start under. Okay, so here's the working thread comes up over the last warp, so you start the next row going under that warp. Very important, so that it doesn't run away. Okay, so let's work all the way across. And the interesting thing is, with plain weave, you don't really see the difference in the end. You have a difference in the edging. You know, as I mentioned before, you have like two sides that have the scallops, and the other sides have the traditional edging. You know, there are ways to work around that too, but that's really not covered, or I don't want to cover that right here. So what I want to show you, okay, let's get to the other side. So here is weaving, and hold your finger on it, and pull, 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 all the way through, and let's pack it. What I want to show you here on the other side is that I came out for the last pin. Let me see if I can show you this. Yes, here. See that pin, 3-pin group? I came out before the last pin of that group. So I did not go straight here, but before the last pin, because for this type of weaving, you skip the center pin of each triple group, 3-pin group. Okay, so, and you can see it, maybe you can see it here too. So it's almost natural, like if you weave straight and pack it straight, that's the natural way where it comes out. And you go around that next pin into the gap, and oh, okay, right-handed, remember, Gabi. So now on this side, I came out under the last warp. Not sure if you can see this. So this is like under the last warp, which means for the new row, I have to start going over. So go over, under, over, under. And it's really, you know, you don't need to remember, oh, on which side do I have to start over, on which side do I have to start under. The idea is really just look at where you came out. If you came out under, start over. If you came out over the last warp thread, start under. The idea is that it will wrap the weft yarn that you are working with around the warp. Okay, so here now we come out in that little space and come out there, because we want, for each group, we want to weave the first and the third nail, and we'll skip the middle nail. If you remember that, you're good for the rest of it. Okay, so here we go. Pack it a little bit. Go around just one nail, and we came out over the last warp thread. So now we go under. Okay, I weave both-handed, so I have to remind myself to turn it around for right-handedness. We come out over, so we start the next row going under. And that's all there is to it. Okay, so the benefit here is that you see you have only the warps are all straight, and it looks very much like traditional weaving, which means you can use traditional weaving patterns, and there are a lot of them, gazillions of them. Just Google weaving patterns, and look particularly for some overshot patterns. There are beautiful things that you can make, and people are actually picking up on that and publishing more patterns for that, and really make beautiful decorations on combined patterns and shapes, which is really beautiful. All right, so that's pretty much all there is to it. So this is the 2-layer warping method. The key to understand, and I'll just switch here to weaving back and forth. If this is confusing, just turn off your brain here. This is like I'm weaving back and forth, left-handed and right-handed, to just keep that picture, because I want to get to the point where we actually start the buttonhole. For those of you who just wanted to peek into the 2-layer warping and weaving method, this is pretty much it. From here on, you will just be weaving all the way to the end, and the keys to remember are, for each 3-pin group, skip the center pin, don't weave around that, and at the end of the row, if your working thread comes out under the last warp, you start the next row going over, and if you come out excuse me, over, you go under. That's pretty much all there is to it until the end. You don't really have the issue that you have with the 3-layer warp, that you have to make sure that you get the last row in. You pretty much just stop at any point. You don't have that last row issue. So you can weave, for example, one thing that's actually quite pretty, you can weave with thicker yarns, and you just stop when you run out of space. So that's the neat part there. Pack as you go is recommended. That's pretty much there's to say about the 2-layer warp and weaving method. I excuse me, will weave here I will weave here 16 rows right now before I start the buttonhole. So if you just wanted to watch for the 2-layer warping and weaving method, you're pretty much done. So you can turn it off and go and check it out yourself. Those of you who want to see how to weave a buttonhole, stay tuned. Let me see how many we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, 9 rows, and I want to pack this a little bit more. For when going back to our weave and stitch along, we want to weave a 1-inch buttonhole, and we have, as usual, it just looks different. It actually does not look different. We have 32 threads in each direction. That has not changed, so that's what we're still working with, unless you intentionally want to have fewer rows. But so for a 1-inch hole buttonhole, we weave the first 16 rows, and let me just switch to my left hand here to get there more quickly. It's really only over at this point for each row. And so we weave for a 1-inch buttonhole, we weave the first 16 rows, and then I will show you a trick that helps, that you only have to use 1 thread, so you don't have to cut any threads. You just weave pretty much a big circle to make you weave pretty much a big circle around the buttonhole, and you don't have to cut threads or anything. So here we go. I like to pack my weaving. A lot of people find this is not necessary. It's absolutely a personal preference. Try it both ways and find what works best for you and what is most satisfying for you. I think I get a little bit more weaving speed if I have my threads straightened out. Other people say, well, it takes time to pack the weaving, which is absolutely true. So just pick your personal preference and find out what works best for you. All right, let me see. And after this, I probably need to just count my rows here. 2, 4, 6, 18, 12, 14. 2 more. Okay, we can do that. I just want to make sure that I use the same number of rows in everything that I also use in the weaving a buttonhole documentation that I wrote for the Weave and Stitch Along, so that you can actually have both. You have the video and you can read along in the instructions booklet or pamphlet, worksheet, whatever you want to call it, or right along with it. All right, so here we go. This is the 16th row. And remember to skip all the middle nails, but you can already see this. It's actually quite neat because if you put too much in, it's not straight. If you put too little in, it's not straight. It only works if you skip that that center nail. And you can see now here on 2 rows you have those scalloped edges on opposite rows and here as well. And then on the other sides, because now you are really just weaving the regular or the traditional up and down for each row, this is where you have those little dinkies that go around the first and the third. Let me see here. Now that's probably the best way to show you. Those little dinkies now go around the first and the third pin of each loom, of each 3-pin group. Okay, here we are, halfway through our square. I have woven 16 rows so far, and this is where I want to start my buttonhole. Again, I will put one 1-inch buttonhole right here in the middle. You can put more than one buttonhole at the same time. You can place them in different locations. I want to stick with the instructions to make the buttonhole for the Weave and Stitch Along. So what we will do next is we weave only halfway across over 15 warp threads. Okay, so we come out over, so we go under. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, you can double check. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15. All right, so 15 threads, and then you pull it through. Hold your finger here that the yarn doesn't run away. And so your weaving, your work yarn comes out in the middle. Okay, you can pack it. And now the next thing you do is you turn around and weave the other direction back to where you came from. You can do that by turning the loom. The same rule applies. Your working thread came out under, so now you go over. And then you continue to the rest, to the other side by going under and over as usual. Let me just do this here, but before I pull it through, I will show you what it looks like. When you get here to the pins, it's the same story. Okay, so that doesn't change. Here you see the working thread came out under, so the needle goes over, and then it's under, over, under, over, under, over to the side. Okay, so here's one thing that will help you to keep the edges of the buttonhole straight. Just pull the thread in just a tiny little bit, not completely. Okay, and then you grab your second needle and put it right over that last warp, and you can just follow along where that warp goes and put the needle over that last warp. Okay, and now when you pull it in, the needle will hold it in place. So you can see here when I pull my working thread, it doesn't pucker the weaving here because the needle holds it in place. All right, let's see if I can give you a close. So there's now one loop that goes over the needle. All right, so we pretend that we have a new side here. Let's pack it. Okay, and we just do a few more rows just like it. So here we go. The needle will stabilize the edge and allow you to work with even tension. Let's turn it around. The working thread comes up over. So we have to start under. And from now on, for the next few rows, we will just weave to that needle in the center. Okay? All right? And so we pretend that the needle is pretty much just a stabilizer for the last warp. And I'm not sure if you can see this, but the warp and the thread are both looped together. So the last stitch here goes under the needle and the last warp. Can you see this? Okay. So, and then we pull it through, finger on here, and just pull it through. By now, by the way, we don't have that much yarn anymore so that to pull through, so that comes in handy. And then you just pack it as usual. Okay? Turn the table. And remember, you come out under, so you go over and you weave back to the beginning. Here we go. And so just over those 15 warps, make sure that you come out here on the side in the right place. And just regular tension. Make sure that the needle doesn't bend too much. So just light to, yeah, I say regular. So light tension, normal tension, the same tension that you used when you wove all the way across, okay? All right, we will weave a total of 8 half rows. We have 4 done. Let's see if I can do the other 4 quickly. So the last stitch goes under the needle and the last thread, and we're pulling it just the way through. By the way, if you don't have a second needle like this, see if you have a shorter needle, or you could use excuse me, like a chopstick. No, one of those skewers. Sorry, not a chopstick would be too thick, but one of those bamboo skewers would work well as too. Or if you are a knitter, use any of your double points. You know, they are reusable. There's nothing wrong. You will not lose anything. You're just using that as a temporary tool here. So a thin double point needle works very well. So whatever you have that's thin and long and sturdy will do just a good job. And here we have a good job knot. let's take care of that. So here is number 6, and I want to pack this. Turn the table. I come over, out over, so I need to go under. You know, by now we already know that, and I actually probably don't need to bore you with that anymore. And so this is the last one. I say 8 rows, which means we will have 4 loops over that needle. Turn around. We come out under the needle, so we start over. To the side, and we want to come out right here in that space between the groups. And this is a little bit crooked, but you know, that indicates whatever it takes to weave, just do it, because the important thing is that it goes over this needle in the center. Okay, let's pack it. And here you can see that we now have 4 loops right here. See if I can show you this. There are 4 loops that go over the needle. Since we are weaving back and forth, that means there are 8 rows. And you come out here in that space, and there are two more groups left right here. Okay? So here is what we will do next. Have your working thread on the left. What we will do next is we will weave that part up here. Okay, and the benefit of that is that we can continue with the same thread, so don't cut anything. It will be all one strand, the whole thing. All right, just bear with me. So what we will do is we will take the thread and lead it on the outside to the top corner. Why do we do that? Because we want to start here weaving on that end and then weave our way down before we weave the second part of the buttonhole. All right? So at this point you can remove the, I call it the buttonhole helper needle. So just pull it out. You will not lose anything. All right, let's take a quick look on what it looks like. You can see it here. Oh, I like that background. It really shows it nicely. That we have just woven to the center and then back to the center and back 4 times, okay? And because we had the needle in as stabilizer, it doesn't pull in that much. It goes nice and straight, and that's what we want for our buttonhole. All right? So next step, take your working thread and go to the top of the corner. That, by the way, is corner 1. You see here the notch for the starting yarn. And you will go in. This is a corner where it's an open corner, and I'll show you. So we want to start weaving right here, rather in the open corner. And we want to start weaving across. So that's a little bit crooked probably. The yarn comes over, it comes out over, so we will start under, even if we have such a long stretch. Okay? So start under, over, under, and you weave all the way across. You know, use your other hand and do whatever it takes to keep those warps under control. And this time you weave all the way across. And bring it to the other side. Oopsie daisy, here we go. And you come out between the first and the second. There, it looks a little bit tight, but you know, when you weave, you probably saw me that I had the needle at an angle and was weaving that way, and finally when I had to come out, I pushed it all the way up and out. That makes it much easier to weave. Okay, so here we go. Now one thing that I want you to be careful with make sure that you have this, see how this loop closes in here on the outside of the pins. Don't pull it in too tight, okay? You want to have it with very little tension, so it should be snug to the pins. I'm not sure if you, let's see if I can show this to you. It should be snug to the pins, so not too loose, but not too tight. Not too tight is more important than too loose, because what we will do to keep it neat, we will weave in that as an extra warp thread, okay? So it will completely disappear by the time we're done with it. All right, turn the table, and now we just weave. We come out under, so next row starts over, over, under, over. We will weave all across a few times to close in that gap to the half buttonhole that we have already woven. All right, so under, over, all the way across. And the trick here is that by the time you get to the other side, I want you to weave that last thread on the outside. Do you see what I'm doing? So you go under the last thread that's on the outside of the pins. That will weave it in with the rest of the square, so it's almost invisible. By the time you're done, you won't see it anymore. Okay, so here we go. And let's pack with our handy dandy forky. All right, let's turn the table. Same rule applies. We came out under, and so we go over around the next pin. I need to fix this. I didn't come out the right way. So here we go. All right, so you need to come out here at the corner, and I didn't do that, so I just fixed it. We came out under, and now we go over. Over the one on the outside and under on the inside. Okay, and then we just weave all the way across as usual. And when we get to the other side, we come out to go around the first pin of the next group. If you need to, just push it up with your finger a little bit to come out at the right spot. And use normal tension, because now you're just weaving, okay? So normal tension. And now you can already see what's happening here. So we started here, wove our way up, and then we wove here the first half of the buttonhole. Then we're sneaking out on the top, and now we're coming from the top down until we have to weave the other half of the buttonhole. That's all there is to it. That's the whole trick, okay? So we'll just need a few more rows here. I'm coming out under, so I need to go over and then just weave normally all the way across. And I'm sorry that this is taking so long, but you know, also this is like real-time weaving. You see the whole thing. I talk a lot with it, so you probably, even for your first time, you'll probably don't need as much time as I do. Again, here's the side that has this extra warp on the outside. This time I come out under. Sorry, I just lost it. That's a little bit tricky, but you can do it. So I want to come out under right here. See that? Thumb on the thread, on the yarn, pull it through, and pack it. Turn the table, and we come out under, so I go over and weave around the third pin of that first group on that side. and we're going over, under, all the way to the other side. And you already see how this is closing in here. Okay, there's the first triple group here on this side, and I come out at the last pin. Here we go. Oh, turn the table, and another over, under. All the way across. And I will show you in a second here what's happening. When you get closer to that half buttonhole that you have already woven, you will see like this looks very similar. Let me see if I can hold this up. The weaving is exactly the same, all right? And that's okay, because now when you go back, let's pull this through here. So we're pulling through, and we're packing it carefully, because this is our last row back. And the last row back will split those two that look alike perfectly here. All right, so let's turn it around. This is our last full row. We go over one more time. Almost there. All right, let's see now. So if this looks a tiny little bit crooked while it's still on the loom, that's absolutely no problem. It will set into place. That looks funny when I use the fork here. So it will settle in place once we're done and taking it off the loom. Okay, now we're here on that side. Guess what we're doing next? Yep, we're going to just weave halfway through and weave this part of the buttonhole, and then we're done. All right, so let's turn the table and get started on that last part. I do want to pack it in a little bit here. All right, go around the next pin. I came out under, so we're going over, and we're just weaving to the center at this point. You know, pretty much it's kind of a duh thing, because there's not much else left right now. Okay, so here you go. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. On this side, you have 16 warps to weave, because, you know, in total we have 31. We used 15 for the first half buttonhole, and now we have 16 left. There's like one more warp here, so you can't really completely center it, but honestly, it's just one thread off, so it's really not a problem. We do the same thing that we did for when we wove the first half. So here is, you weave to the center, and now you take your buttonhole helper needle and put it right over that last warp, and then you weave back to the beginning. So turn it around. We came out under, so we go over. And so we weave only the half rows back to the beginning. It takes a little bit wiggling. Wiggling is of course a technical term, but remember to use, whatever it takes. You don't have to go straight. You can like work at a little angle. Have your needle work with the needle between those pins, which keeps it at a flatter angle, which helps it better to go through. So whatever it takes, you can't really go, well, I'm sure there's a way to go wrong, but most likely with regular methods, you will be just fine. All right, and here's already our first turn, which means we have woven 2 rows. And yeah, guess what we will do? We will weave as many rows on this side as we have woven on the other side. So that means we have to go back and forth 4 times to weave 8 rows. Here's another example. If this guy here keeps it down and is in the way, just go straight over here to the other side and pull it down, or pull it out like this, okay? So you don't have to work at an angle, really whatever it takes. Turn the table, and we're going over the needle and under, over, back to the pins. I should hold this. I'm trying to use the table to be able to show you in the best way. Most likely when you actually weave this, you will hold it in your hands or have it on your lap or on a pillow or what have you, which makes it much easier to maneuver. The last few rows are a little bit difficult, or more difficult to weave. But it's worth it, because what you're doing is you are weaving a buttonhole. All right, so here we go, and now we have 2 loops over our buttonhole, across our buttonhole helper, which means we're halfway through with this side. And you will see, the nice thing is that, really compared to real-time weaving, the stretches that you have to weave are so tiny, maximum 4 inches, duh, that whatever seems tedious won't last long. There you go. Last turn, believe it or not. We're almost there. And you can see that this is getting crowded here. So just make sure that you have enough space to work. I'm just holding this up here. If you have something like that, that's perfect. So go around the last nail here to close in. And then one more time, work towards the center. And I made a mistake. I came out under and started under, so I have to do that row again. Just pull it out when that happens. Don't worry about it. Here we go. I come out under, and so I go over, over, under to the center. This is just the excitement, if I need an excuse, that we are so close to being done. Here we go. That looks better. Okay, so now I open up the shed a little bit for the last row, and I show you that. So those 2 rows, they look the same from this weaving and from this weaving. Make the shed big enough so that it's easy for you to weave through it. We came out under, so we go over, you could, if you want to, weave this last stretch because it's the last row. You could weave it in multiple small stitches. You might even switch to your tapestry needle if you find the weaving needle is too long. That's another option. But you can see here that, you know, while I just set those sentences, I made it through. It's really not that big of a deal. Here you go. We can release the thread right here, but we can pull out our helping buttonhole helper needle, and this looks a little bit, here's our buttonhole. Isn't that cool? This looks a little bit stretched, but you know, watch when we take it off the loom, it will just slide in perfectly. Let's do that right now. By the way, you can see here the working thread comes out in the middle of the row here. So if you plan to sew your motifs together, it's probably less optimal than what you would do, but you could just throw this or sew this way and then this way. The benefit, in my opinion, is that you have it all woven with one thread. So let's pop it off and take a look at our little buttonhole here. Wiggle, wiggle. And here you go. Here's your buttonhole. And you can see that it, once it's off the loom, it just closes in very nicely. You can control a lot with tension. Excuse me. But I think this is probably as good as it gets, and definitely good enough. So, oh, we can try one thing here. We could just use this and do the test. And yes, it certainly fits a 1-inch button. All right, so here we go. It works. So let's take a final look here. Just to look at the anatomy, just imagine the buttonhole wouldn't be there. You can see, so this is what the 2-layer warp will look like if you follow just the regular instructions. You have 2 sides with the scallops up here and here, and then those sides here are regular traditional selvage where the thread goes around each warp. All right, and you will also see here, since we wove the buttonhole, we had this little stretch here on this side that had this little extra warp, and you can see how it weaves in just beautifully with minimal interruption. So that helps that you don't have an extra knot on anything, and it's taken care of while you are weaving. So that's an extra bonus. All right, but this would be all. So you learned 2 things if you followed along, which is the 2-layer warp and the new buttonhole. I really want to just show this, how to weave a buttonhole on the Zoom loom, or any other loom that has this type of 3-pin grouping. And if you need instructions besides this video, you can find everything you need in our Weave and Stitch Along, preparing for week 5, weaving a buttonhole. And that's all there is to it. I hope to see more buttonholes now, and hopefully also a lot of 2-layer warping motifs with lots of overshots and lots of inspirational traditional weaving patterns. All right, thank you very much for watching, and good luck with your 2-layer warp weaving and with your buttonholes. Bye, auf Wiedersehen.